Good evening, listeners and viewers as well, because we, of course, also on the internet with an outside broadcast. We are bringing to you live on radio and on social media. We are at the UE Global Campus for an event we have been promoting since morning called by the Integrity Commission, and we are now being asked to stand. Recognize our nation. Come ye forward, sons and daughters of this gem beyond compare. Strive for honor, sons and daughters, do the right, be firm, be fair. Toil with hearts and hands and voices, we must prosper, sound the call, in which everyone rejoices, all for each and each for all. And we remain standing. A mighty, mighty God, we thank you so very much. We thank you because we've been in your presence this entire day. We've been in your presence for all of our lives. You've created us, you know us. We thank you for the purpose that brings us here, for the purpose that brings everybody who is here right now. We thank you so very much for the people who are listening. We ask you, Lord, to anoint the speakers, anoint the moderator, anoint this discussion, Lord, that it can bear the fruit that you'd want it to bear in our society, in our own personal lives. We thank you for calling us to this moment. We thank you. We lift up our country, our leaders, and our people entirely to you. And we ask, Lord, that this in itself will be one of the things that draws us closer and closer to you, makes us more and more the people that you've called us to be. And we offer this prayer in Jesus' name and with thanksgiving. Amen. So we are at the UE Campus for this panel discussion organized by the Integrity Commission. Steve Hyacinth is now at the podium.
Mr. Moderator, esteemed panelists, members of the media, members of the listening public here in the audience and via radio or online, staff of the Commission, ladies and gentlemen. Borrowing the words of St. Peter, it is good to be here. I'm honored to have been assigned the task just to welcome you. I can do so in 2 words, or 3, in fact. I welcome you and go back to my seat and relax for the night. But trust me, I just want to say a few more things. Borrowing the words of St. Peter, it is good to be here. I am honored to have been assigned the task to welcome you. On Saturday, December 9th, the world joins in commemorating Anti-Corruption Day. This panel discussion is the second of 2 activities planned by the Integrity Commission for this commemoration. The first was an ecumenical service held on Monday, December 4th. The theme for the day is Uniting the World Against Corruption. Our message as a commission is that when integrity is the foundation of our lives, we cannot be brought, coerced, or otherwise encouraged to be dishonest and corrupt. To further concretize this message, our panelists will examine the following topics from various angles. And the topic that we are going to look at this evening is there a role for everyone in promoting integrity in public office in the Commonwealth of Dominica? Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Integrity Commission, we welcome you, each and all of you, and encourage all to listen and enter into the spirit of the discussion so that at the end, we may leave here more committed to promoting integrity in every sphere of life. I hope tonight will be a very good occasion for each and every one of you. And really, I look forward to your participation in whatever way possible. Thank you very much. Obviously, the team of commissioners each has a part to play, and it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Holmes, Commissioner Holmes, who shall now introduce the panel.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, our moderator, chair, secretary, our chair, members of staff, all persons in public life, the listening public, the media, our panelists, and our dear moderator. This evening, I just want to remind of the topic before I do the formal invitation to the panelists. Is there a role for everyone in promoting integrity in public office in the Commonwealth of Dominica? A glimpse of what integrity is. Integrity has to do with the inner self, honesty and trustworthiness, a demonstration of moral principles that all can identify and can be transformed as an example for others, being a role model. This evening, our panel discussion will be concentrating on integrity as the business of everyone. That is why we ask the question, is there a place for everyone, I would say. On Monday, as the chair said, we had the ecumenical service, and a word came up. That word, together. We have to work together for the best for integrity. And then we sang the first verse of our national anthem. It's really about integrity, if you really listen to the words attentively. And so tonight we have, representing the religious community, we have Pastor Michael Jean-Jacques, who is with the Grace and Truth Fellowship Global Ministries. He is an empowered host on a program on DBS, and he's also a counselor. We also have on the side of the law, we have been represented tonight by Miss Noelis Knight. Yes, I know the name, right? Didier? Didier. Noelis Knight Didier. I knew that, my lawyer, so I have to be careful. So she is really the head of the bar association. I'm correct, right? Right, okay. And then also we have another lawyer, but I'm not even looking at her as a lawyer tonight, She is, but she is a member of the Integrity Commission. So we are well represented. We're hoping to have, I just have to apologize, make an apology, because some people would be expecting a young person to be representing the youth. Unfortunately, that is not to happen tonight. And so our very own Integrity Commission, Miss Shillingford, and now our dear moderator, a dear friend of mine, I don't see him for a long time, but I saw him tonight, and he looks younger than me, you know. And so the reason why we have Mr. Tim Dura, our moderator, Mr. Dura is a well-established and renowned journalist who achieved the training in mass communication at UE. I'm not sure which UE, if he's trained Mona, Jamaica, okay? And then he worked at DBS, and he was also the news anchor at Mapping Telecoms. He is presently managing director of Dominica News Online. Mr. Dura is highly respected and knowledgeable, a good individual who knows about integrity. He is indeed a mentor to our young journalists. Mr. Dura is being trusted tonight with the responsibility to guide our panelists to stay on track with the topic at hand, integrity. To guide our panelists and audience who will be presenting, maybe by questions or comments, the integrity and then the response to integrity. To make comments and ask questions in truth, honesty, and not to put down or attempt to water down the integrity of others. I now hand over to our highly qualified moderator, Mr. Tim Dura.
If you don't mind me sitting, I will leave the microphone and the lectern to the more qualified people here to speak about integrity. But thank you very much, Mr. Holmes, for this pressure-filled introduction, right? But I must say that I am extremely delighted, and I feel honored, really, to have been identified as someone to moderate such an esteemed discussion tonight. Well, a discussion which consists of esteemed people who are going to share with us their understanding of the role of everyone in promoting integrity in public office. Now, as I said, I'm not the expert, so I'm not going to spend time trying to give the impression that I know so much about integrity as Mr. Holmes tried to make it out to be, but to go right ahead into the presentations tonight and call to the microphone Mrs. Noelise Knight Didier, I'm not going to forget that. She was introduced by Mr. Holmes as the president of the Dominica Bar Association and herself an upstanding attorney in Dominica. So, Mrs. Didier, if you would go to the... Sure, I guess so.
Integrity, a few things come to mind. Good reputation, transparency, honesty, and unwillingness to betray with one's good morals. Am I being ready? Oh, I guess I have to. Go ahead. Hearing me now? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now? Good.
So I will just repeat that when one thinks of integrity, I think a few words come to mind: good reputation, honesty, transparency, and unwillingness to betray one's good morals, absence of corruption. And one may think further that qualities such as these are innate qualities. Either you have them or you don't. You're either honest or you're not. However, it is most times impossible to ascertain the true nature of a person until it is too late.
When it comes to officials in public office, it's even more important, and we certainly ought not to leave it to trust or chance. While there are no doubt many officials of the highest degree of integrity ingrained within them, history has taught us that many do not, unfortunately, and the repercussions are damning. All are not like the late Edward Oliver Libler, who in his farewell speech to the Dominica Labour Party in July of 1974 declared his accumulated assets and liabilities over 17 years of elective office as follows. I own 4 acres of land, a 3-bedroom house, a shared interest in family-owned land, $56.33 in Barclays Bank, $25.07 at Royal Bank of Canada, and an overdraft facility of $465 at Barclays Bank. In fact, even though some believe that integrity is something that is within you, many opine that even when one starts out in public office with the highest degree of ingrained integrity, by midterm, one is susceptible to corruption and may even become corrupt. Former chairperson of the Integrity in Public Office Commission, Mr. Julian Johnson, in his paper delivered to the Caribbean Small States Conference in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in June of 2012, cited Dr. Derek McCoy's book entitled Corruption, Law, Governance, and Ethics in the Commonwealth Caribbean, as positing that corruption is more rationally treated as a problem of agency and accountability rather than deviant behavior. Dr. McCoy states, a society is corrupt because public agents engaged to manage and administer its public bureaucracies naturally seek to maximize their own welfare, that their activities are not sufficiently transparent, and that they are often in positions of moral hazard. In other words, it is an occupational hazard. Moral hazard arises in the public service where public agents can engage in corrupt activity with no real fear that any significant adverse consequence will follow. Where public sector agents rarely face the consequences of their corrupt acts, or where those acts are treated as merely venial, those agents are more likely to pursue a corrupt course of action and will have little incentive not to do so. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, since not all of us are naturally imbued with the level of integrity required of public office, or there exists a threat that those who are will be corrupted, it is imperative that there are laws and systems in place to extract and establish such integrity, even if by force. And those laws can be enforced by all of us. In fact, not only can they be enforced by all of us, it is the civic duty of all of us to ensure that those laws are enforced. The repercussions, ladies and gentlemen, of a corrupt society, corrupt officials, affect us all. At the May 2023 13th Annual Commonwealth Regional Anti-Corruption Conference, the Commonwealth Secretary General stated, while we tend to think of corruption in purely monetary terms, the truth is that it costs us the quality of our lives. No country, region, or community is immune. It damages education, health, justice, democracy, prosperity, and development. The Secretary General added, we need to take swift and decisive action to improve transparency and accountability. She stated that together, as Mr. Holmes says, together we can work towards solving this monumental challenge. So to answer the question posed in this discussion very directly, not only do we all have a role to play, but it is our duty, our civic duty, and our responsibility as citizens, every one of us, to play a role in promoting integrity in public office. It affects our country and our livelihoods. Therefore, we all have to act. From Parliament, to the clergy, to the media, to John and Jane Public, we have a duty. Now, how do we move that duty? How do we do it? In virtually all modern democracies, administrative officials are held accountable through about 3 ways. There are connected ways: the political way, the managerial way, and the legal way. Tonight, I wish to focus on the legal way for obvious reasons. The political way is obvious, ladies and gentlemen, friends. It's obvious. If a government is corrupt, the power is within the people to vote them out of office. Simple as that. It is within us. It's our right, it's our duty. We vote and we say we don't like the corruption, get out, time for the next. The unfortunate thing is that although political parties, political oppositions always say, well, the government is corrupt and they're voted out because of corruption, you have now a new party coming in and they do the same thing. That is the unfortunate thing. And so this is where the law comes in, that no matter who is in office, you have the law that you can rely on to do something about it. My dear friends, the other panelists, or at least the other commissioner on the panel, will discuss the route to promoting integrity in public office by complaints through the IPO. I am sure, I hope she does. And this is one of the aspects of the legal route, or a combination of managerial and legal. But I wish tonight to address you on the other legal route, or another legal route, which is judicial review of administrative action through the courts. Ladies and gentlemen, judicial review is a remedy exercised by the courts in Dominica, adopted under our common law system. Judicial review was introduced into the common law because it was realized as early as the 13th century that in order to stem possible abuses, a system was required to provide checks and balances on the behavior of public bodies. To quote the Honorable Justice Bernie Stevenson in the case of Cara Shillingford versus the Integrity in Public Office Commission and others, the availability of judicial review against public bodies is an important legitimate safeguard. It is the principal means by which the courts are able to scrutinize the action of public bodies to ensure that they act lawfully and fairly. Judicial review provides protection to citizens by making sure public bodies are subject to the rule of law. To put Justice Stevenson's remarks another way, judicial review operates to curb abuses of power by ensuring that public bodies are not above the law, and thereby protecting the rights and interests of those so affected, the citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, any person, a natural person, you and me, a corporate person, a company, a big person, a small person. When I say big, I mean big in society or small in society. A manager, a cleaner, any person is entitled to seek the help of the courts by way of judicial review under the correct circumstances. So judicial review is not only for instances, as we hear about all the time, of a big shot being charged with a crime and they apply for judicial review to challenge the charge or the prosecution against them. It is not only for ministers challenging the decision of the Integrity in Public Office to investigate them. No, it is for the ordinary citizen who in some way has been negatively impacted by the unlawful or unfair action, decision, inaction, or indecision of a public authority or a person in public office. I'm just going to refer to those persons or an office as a public person. So judicial review, I can just say what judicial review is not. Judicial review is not the substituting of the court's discretion for that of a public person. It will not overturn a decision if the decision was made in the correct manner. Judicial review is where a decision or action is taken as a result of a bad or unlawful procedure. To set out the situations where judicial review is available, I again thank Justice Bernie Stevenson, in the same case that I mentioned earlier, who summarizes them so succinctly. She says this: the applicant has to show that the decision or act complained of is tainted with illegality, irrationality, procedural impropriety. Illegality is when the decision-making authority commits an error of law in the process of taking or making the decision, acting without jurisdiction or ultra vires or contrary to the provisions of law, or its principles are instances of illegality. And acting ultra vires, I mean simply that a person in public office has certain powers that they are confined to. And when they act outside of those powers and it affects you, you have a right to take judicial review. It is, for example, illegality where a permanent secretary of a ministry interdicts a public servant on the direction of the personnel committee when the powers to do so are vested by law in the Public Services Commission. She continues, irrationality is where there is gross unreasonableness in the decision taken or act done that no reasonable authority addressing itself to the facts and the law before it would have made such a decision. Procedural impropriety is when there is a failure to act fairly on the part of the public authority. The unfairness may be in non-observance of the rules of natural justice. Simply a decision was made against you and you were not given an opportunity to be heard. It may also involve failure to adhere and observe procedural rules expressly laid down in the law. I will give some of my own examples of where judicial review is available to you. It is where a simple matter, where you apply for a driver's license or a vehicular license, and you are denied it without the provision of a reason. And I invite you to substitute for driver's license any other thing that you apply for within the sphere of the public service you apply for, you're turned down, and no reason is given. That is subject to judicial review. You have applied for, where you have been plying your trade in the same public place for several years, and without advance notice or reasons given to you, you are ordered to immediately leave the place, or worse yet, you are picked up and sent away. It is where you have placed your wrongful dismissal claim, you have unfairly terminated from your job, and you take that claim before the employment tribunal at the Ministry of Trade of Labor for hearing and determination, and there is such delay in your hearing, or there is no constituted tribunal to hear it, and your evidence and your witnesses wither away together with your claim. There you have a right. You can apply. It is where your name is on the list of persons awaiting a free house from the government, and the list of the persons who have gotten a house is released. Your name is not on it, but there is no disclosure as to how and why these persons were selected and not you. There is no transparency. In those circumstances, ladies and gentlemen, you, me, if you are in those situations, any one of us, we can apply to the courts for help. It is our way of saying, this is not right. I need answers. I need help. Let me do something about it. You may wonder, if, okay, I apply for judicial review, what can I get? What is the relief I can get from the court? The court, when you have been aggrieved by the decision or inaction of a public authority, the court can order or to secure the performance of a public person of a public duty that they are not performing. This is called mandamus. Also, the court can order prohibition, where they forbid a public body from acting contrary to law or in excess of their statutory power. And finally, a court can order certiorari. It's a fancy word. All it means is that they quash the decision, the unlawful decision that was made. They set it aside. They say it's no good, it's no good. It wasn't arrived at properly. There was no natural justice. The person was not given a chance to be heard and so on. It's no good. We set it aside. Now, there are restrictions, of course, to judicial review, and there are legal defenses that the other side may take and so on. But the restrictions I'm thinking about this evening is that, restrictions such as cost, delay, and so on. Sadly, in Dominica and in many other Caribbean islands, I would say probably with the notable exception of Trinidad, the judicial review route is seldom used effectively. Firstly, persons generally shy away from the courts. Nobody likes to go to court. I don't know why or not. Okay. People People don't like to go to court, of course, because of the high cost, for instance, the high cost of going to court, the delays when they go to court. Sometimes people don't trust the judicial system, and I think that that lack of trust mainly comes from the delays. The issue of delays is a troublesome one. It's very troublesome. And judicial review, by its nature, is supposed to be a fast-track route to securing relief against a person in public office who is committing an unlawful act. In fact, if you, as the victim of an unlawful act, delays in bringing your application for judicial review, that can be a bar. But it's unfortunate that you don't delay, you move quickly, but when you get into the court system, there is delay. And I must confess that at times, I myself want to apply for judicial review against the court for its delay. Against the court or the ministry responsible for the courts. I would say that this problem can be addressed with constant and unmitigated advocacy. Advocacy for change by lawyers, that's me, that's Ms. Shillingford, by the Bar Association, again, same, and citizens who use the courts. So it is not just the lawyers who have to advocate for change, citizens have to advocate for change. When your matter is taking too long, you have to voice that opinion. You must speak about it, voice it, say it, you know? The problem of cost, I would say, actually is sometimes not as challenging as persons assume it would be. Yes, it is costly to go to court, but particularly for judicial review matters, I am aware that many counsel willingly give their services either for free of charge, or reduced or deferred fees when they meet the plea of a citizen who has been dealt an injustice at the hands of a public person. What is the reason for this? It is because persons in public office, more than private citizens, are the ones expected to have the highest degree of integrity for the benefit of the citizens. When one betrays this integrity, it is a betrayal not just to the citizen affected, but to the public at large. So as lawyers, we feel a responsibility to assist. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems, I don't know, that there is lately either a fear gripping our society, preventing many of us from taking decisive action against unlawful acts or against acts that are unfair. And when I say decisive action, I'm not just talking about talk, not just calling the radio and talk. Decisive action, such as taking judicial review, such as filing a complaint with the Integrity in Public Office Act. And some also feel that doing so may be doing so in vain because others have not been successful. In its formative years, I think, in its early years, complaints were laid before the Integrity in Public Office Commission. Yes, a few of them, not very many. They were not successful. But in recent years, there have been no complaints at all. If you look at the reports of the recent years, there have been 0 complaints before the Integrity in Public Office Commission. Nobody's even trying. What's up with us? What's going on? Ladies and gentlemen, it is difficult, I would say, not to let a lack of success on previous occasions or by other parties be a deterrent, but it is my view that citizens must persist. What not to do, ladies and gentlemen, is go down the slippery slope of permitting acts of malfeasance, corruption, unlawfulness, and/or unfairness by public persons to be inflicted directly upon us and do nothing about it. If we do so, these acts will continue. They will happen time and time again. They will happen to the next person in your situation. They will never stop because the offender has not faced the consequences. One would be surprised, actually, that the mere act of lodging a complaint or filing a court action, despite the final outcome, can be a deterrent to those public officers. In many of these court matters filed for judicial review, the situation is rectified even before a trial or a full hearing, simply because the action has been filed. The victim spoke up, they did something, they took decisive action. And the effect as well is that in the future, the offender thinks twice before again engaging in such actions. They don't want to go through that again. My dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, I will end by repeating the words of Dr. McCoy mentioned earlier. Moral hazard arises in the public service when public agents can engage in corrupt activity with no real fear that any significant adverse consequence will follow. Where public sector agents rarely face the consequences of their corrupt acts, or where those acts are treated as mere venial, those agents are more likely to pursue a corrupt course of action and will have little incentive not to do so. So let us all act, take decisive action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Knight Didier, for a very insightful presentation. But I think this tells me that what the Integrity Commission is doing this evening is a very important part of the process, what I hope will be a process of educating, the public about their rights. In other words, I listened very closely to Noelis tonight, and she's brought up some very interesting, information in terms of what we as citizens of the country, are able to do, have the power to do and the right to do. But the question is how many of us really know about it, And I believe tonight is the beginning, I hope, of the process of a continuing education, of the public as to how, what their rights are in terms of tackling this question of integrity in public office. But as I said, I'm not a panelist, right? So let's pass the microphone over now to Pastor Jean-Jacques, who is a pastor at the Full Gospel Fellowship Church, right?
I'll correct it. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to our distinct panelists, commissioners, I guess media, those viewing online, my daughter, just permit me to plug that in, and everyone else. It's just a pleasure to be here. I guess I'm listening to the lawyer and I'm like, wow. So I'm going to, in my presentation, more deal with the layman part of it, and maybe the street vibes part of it, if I should maybe put it that way. And skip my presentation to, I guess within my time, and wait for your question. I've asked folks to pray for me when your questions come, because I guess that might be the most interesting part. But as I've said, well, the correction I wanted to make, I'm not part of Truth and Grace. I am basically part of People's Pentecostal Family Church. So I could maybe just make that correction. The topic before us tonight, I guess, as a counselor, can be considered as a close-ended question. Right, Mr. Holmes, you taught me well. Thus, making my presentation, if I should choose, short and straightforward with a one-word answer. And I could hit the door after I've done that. However, I'll not yield to that temptation. The question is, and it came to me maybe as a statement, but the question is there a role for everyone in promoting integrity in public office in the Commonwealth of Dominica? My answer to this would be, obviously, yes, there is a role for everyone. Every boy, every girl, every citizen. Whether we do it or not, whether we are given the environment or, to do it, something we'll talk about. Public officers at some point in their service to the country would take an oath. Some would do that using the Bible. Some may raise their hands. I have found it, therefore, interesting that the Bible, after that, becomes a book of convenience to justify one's action, or, on the other hand, to condemn another person's action. And I found the convenience of using it sometimes disturbing. Samuel, who was Israel's first prophet, stood before the people of Israel in the presence of the first king, Saul, and asked an accountability question to all of Israel concerning himself as a leader. And it was interesting hearing Mrs. Didier, is that right? Speak of E.O. Liblas declaring his assets to the end of his journey. And quite a lot of money, I must say. Samuel, he asked an accountability question of all of Israel concerning himself. Where else do we find leaders doing that? Thankfully, Mr. Libla do that. There's a stubbornness about leaders to say things. There is a lot of talk about asking me and wanting me to say it, but there is a defense, when the question is asked. But Samuel in 1 Samuel, I'll read the text. 1 Samuel chapter 12, verse 1 to 5. He addresses Israel. And the Bible says to us, "Then Samuel said to all Israel, 'Behold, I have listened to your voice in everything that you have said to me, and have appointed a king over you.'" In that statement, I think he's speaking of transparency, he's speaking of the involvement of people, a little bit of democracy within a theocracy, and he's mentioning all of that. In verse 2 it says, "And now, here is the king walking before you. As for me, I am old and gray, and here are my sons with you." He goes on to say, "I have walked before you from my childhood to this day," speaking to the people, saying to them, "You know me. You know my vibes. You know how I operated. You know how I started. And you can see how I'm ending. You know me from my childhood." And he goes on and he says, "Here I am. Testify against me." So he's saying to them, "Come on, talk to me and testify against me before the Lord and Saul the king, he's anointed, if I have done someone wrong. Whose ox have I taken? Or whose donkey have I taken? Or whom have I exploited? Whom have I oppressed? Or from whose hand have I taken a bribe to blind my eyes to the truth? Tell me, and I will restore it to you." That's a strong statement. Do we have anybody in our present time that can now come and say to us, that kind of stuff? And I guess maybe sometimes that's where the disappointment with the Integrity Commission may come, because from our standpoint, we don't feel the pressure is applied, even if some things are said or known. And it's noted that there have been no complaint over a couple of years. And that's not a good thing, and we have to ask ourselves why. Verse 4, it says, "They said," the people now answered, and the Bible says, "They said, 'You have not exploited us, or oppressed us, or taken anything at all from a man's hand.'" And I'm like, wow. What a thing to say of a leader by the public, not his boys. Because in them times, we have the boys covering up and doing all kinds of stuff. But the public is saying, "Look, you have not exploited us. You have not oppressed us. You have not taken anything from us outside of what maybe is yours." Samuel continues to press, and Samuel says to them, "The Lord is a witness against you, and Saul, his anointed, is a witness this day that you have not found anything in my hands." And they answered, "He is a witness." One of the interesting things I have heard with the using of the Bible, like I said, to justify stuff or not, I hear people call God as witness. God is my witness. And it is such a dangerous thing. I mean, you know, he's a God of mercy, and we play on his mercy. And we play on his mercy when we exploit, when we corrupt, when we do all kinds of stuff. And if he would come and wipe out some persons, I guess we'll stop saying that. You know, and Samuel is saying, you know, before God, and the people say, yes, he is witness. Because in some ways they say the people, they're the voice of God, in some ways. And we, you know, in our time, we kind of break a stick in our ear. We don't want to hear that. That story is one of transparency and accountability. The man was the first prophet. He's old and he's saying, look, tell me about my operations. I'm before you. There cannot be the promoting of integrity without transparency and accountability, along with honesty with answers that does not find contradiction by the actions that follow. What I mean by that, sometimes we hear an answer, and what we see is far removed from the answer that is given. And then nothing else is said. One of the things I've discovered is some people don't like and feel very uncomfortable with accountability questions. And if we're going to be looking at the role of everyone within the whole thing, we as a people must ask accountability questions. And I find it that folks don't like accountability questions. I'm a husband, and I have one child. I say to persons, my daughter sometimes asks me more accountability questions than my wife. And I cannot just shut her up. And you know, what we have in this time, and maybe that's why folks are not saying anything, because they have not received answers to accountability questions. Accountability question is part of public life. I'm a public figure, I'm asked questions. If you are in public life, if you're a public officer, accountability questions, that's things you have to answer. So anyone in public life should be answerable to the public, and that is promoting integrity. If you don't want to answer me, it says a lot about your dealings. And it may even say you may be hiding something. And we have situations where persons are embarrassed when they ask questions. Persons are told stuff, you know. Again, we conveniently answer things. Not everyone is or will be in public office. However, everyone can help promote integrity in public office. And by promoting, I'm speaking here of giving support where and when necessary. I'm thinking of giving publicity to matters so as to create public awareness. I'm thinking of staying informed about issues as a people and not, getting the information in any way that's biased, but in balanced ways. I have, as I move around, listen to people who are just echoes of stories without facts, without finding out the truth. They're just echoes. I mean, I heard some guy give me word for word something I was said on the radio, and I'm like, do you know the facts? Do you know this? Have you listened? So we have to stay informed about the issues and find the right information. Participating in the democratic process through voting, and in that process report instances of unethical behaviors and other matters of concern as they encounter these. We have to do that. The idea of persons saying, I'm not going to vote, I'm not doing this, is not showing that you are interested in integrity within public office. Because like the lawyer said, that's one way, or a political will, or a political way. It's one way we can address some matters. And some, as we seek to address that matter, some can be whistleblowers. They can shout some stuff out. I would like to put these questions before us as we think of our role in promoting integrity in public office. These questions in some ways lead to reasons why everyone isn't involved in promoting integrity. First question, what are we demanding of those in office before they enter and whilst in office? What are we demanding of them? Secondly, are our demands considerate? Are our demands fair in light of given situations? You know, we have persons entering because you must give me something. You know, if you want me to do that, we must give you something. You know, to vote, you must give me something. You know, we demand stuff. And we demand stuff that if you want to stay there, you got to continue to give me some things. Do we find ourselves by some of our demands on those in public office putting a play where they have to be shady in the help they give? You got to cover up some stuff. What are we overlooking in order to get our demands? There are persons who overlook a lot of things within the boys, within the groups. The Creole saying is, si pani sutiwe, ipani vole. And a lot of times, because of how we as public deal with public officers, we in that can suit away their malpractices because of the demands, because of what we ask. So, finally, the divide and conquer approach is one method used to cripple the collective approach at ensuring integrity in office. A divide and conquer. So we put people in ways where, you know, we have some there and we have some who support. You know, we divide and conquer. And that's where our society is. That's how weak we have become, because persons have successfully divided us and conquered us. And as a result, they continue to do as they please. And because of the divide, we say nothing or can say nothing. You know, many people are just muzzled within the society. They're mute within the society because the divide and conquer rule, or their demands or their wishes, or what they ask for, they're getting it. The under the table deals, all of that stuff, have silent voices. This divide and conquer approach has, through means known and unknown, silent the voices of those who will speak. And sometimes the divide and conquer thing goes after those who speak, so that we buy them. That is not, we're looking at the interests of integrity within a public servant. I'm constantly reminded that people will choose their livelihood over their involvement in any matter that will put their livelihood at risk or their life at risk. We will choose livelihood. And a lot of times, persons are not prepared. That's why the commission not getting vibes. Because persons may not be prepared to put their livelihood at risk, to speak out, to address something, to say that's wrong. I remember, you know, let me leave this example aside for now. So when we look at this idea of everyone promoting integrity in public office in the Commonwealth of Dominica, the question always comes up, who will protect me? That's what people say. Who will protect me? Well, you want me to say stuff? Well, you want me to speak? But who will protect me? The divide and conquer. I'm coming after you. You know, the squeezing, the expectation, even whistleblowers within the public service. sometimes moved out, shipped out, done something with. So people continue to protect their own interests. Because who's going to protect me if I do that? The day will be, or that day will be a blessed day when within the Commonwealth of Dominica, our people can collectively hold public officers to their word, their words, and the standard of the Constitution. Faith in the Integrity Commission will come when as a people we see them holding these public officers to the standard set and we are given the evidence to show it. Do we have it? We shouldn't celebrate the fact that nobody have brought up something in years. We should cry. We should pain our hearts. So faith in the Integrity Commission will come when as a people we see them holding these public officers to the standard set. I try to read through this document, it was sent to me. I try to read through that. It's quite a bit of legal stuff. And I guess it's the Parliament who said it and ratified by so many. So the words are convenient words, some of them. I will rest my case here and wait for your questions. Thank you very much.
Well, I guess this is what Pastor Jean-Jacques does on a regular basis, get down to the nitty-gritty, right? Bring this topic, you've taken this topic down to earth, right down to the very ground. And it raises the question, though, that which I mentioned earlier on, and that is, it is one thing to be ignorant, of what your rights are and what you're supposed to do to rectify a particular situation, but it is another to know and do nothing about it, and deliberately do nothing about it, and perhaps that's what Pastor Jean-Jacques is alluding to. But when our presentations are over, I hope he'll take the opportunity to point out exactly what the church is doing or can do to help promote, the need for people to take up their roles, in promoting integrity in public office. But for now, I want to pass you over to a lady who perhaps is an example of someone who holds people to account, right? She demands accountability of everyone as far as integrity and as far as legal behavior is concerned. She's a member of the Integrity in Public Office, and she took the commission to court, right, for what she considers to be a breach of one of the laws of the Integrity in Public, or aspects of the Integrity in Public Office Act. I now hand you over to Ms. Kara Shillingford for her presentation.
Okay, testing. Can everyone hear me loud and clear? Okay, Mr. Moderator, specially invited guests, my fellow panelists, staff of the Integrity Commission, all persons gathered here today, and to everyone listening via the radio or via email, good evening. In addressing the topic, is there a role for everyone in promoting integrity in public office in the Commonwealth of Dominica? I hope to convince you that yes, there is a role for everyone. In doing so, I will focus on three main points. The first point, everyone in Dominica, regardless of age, regardless of how young or how old, can contribute towards a cultural change in order to promote integrity. By this I mean a change from our current culture, where corruption is something that only a few persons dare to speak up against, where corruption is something which is accepted as just being part of the system, where people are more concerned with what they can get, whether it is crumbs or whether it's called cool out, whatever it is that they can get for themselves, and simply do not care about fighting corruption. A change from this culture to a new culture, a different culture where every person is in Dominica is conscious of the need to fight corruption, where every and anyone can become a whistleblower, can come forward and give evidence against those who are corrupt without fear of any backlash. So that's the first point. Secondly, the Integrity in Public Office Act is a very beautiful text. However, it can only work if we are all aware of our duties under the Act, and if it is that we all have the courage and the wisdom to perform our duties. Finally, I will look at the legislative changes which I believe are necessary in order to strengthen the IPO Act. Now under the issue as it relates to the cultural change, at our ecumenical service, which was held on Monday, Father Conan Shillingford stated, and I quote, "Corruption is our common enemy." He made the point that instead of fighting each other, we should unite in the fight against corruption. The great Martin Luther King once said, "We must live together as brothers and sisters or perish together as fools." I am adding my voice to this call for unity against corruption. Corruption is an evil monster which, if left unchallenged, will grow and will destroy every aspect of society. My brothers and sisters, I am inviting you to ask yourself two questions. What is corruption? And why is it important to fight corruption? Now, to answer the question, what is corruption? We can look at the Integrity in Public Office Act. Although there is no one definition of corruption, the Act provides us with a code of conduct which sets out certain things which persons in public office should not do. And I'm just going to run through some of the codes, but it's a list of, about 10 to 15 codes, which everyone should familiarize himself or herself with. But the first code, it says, "A person in public life shall not," and I quote, "in return for anything done or to be done or omitted to be done in the execution of his duties, ask for or accept for himself or any person any money, property, benefits, or favors of any kind over and above that which he is lawfully entitled to receive for the performance of his duties." That is the first code of conduct. What this says to persons in public life is that you are being paid a salary to do your job. The salary that you are being paid is enough. If it is that you're not satisfied with the salary, give up the position. Go into the private sector. Open up a business of your own where you can make whatever it is that you feel you deserve. However, it is wrong to stay within the public service. It is wrong to remain in a public office and try to get payment above and beyond your salary for what you are already being paid to do. So this means that persons in public life, for example, and these are only hypothetical examples, they should not accept monies under the table or gifts on the side for granting some license or permits or visa or title, etc., or fast tracking an application for these things. Now, the problem that this creates is that when persons in public life accept monies under the table to do certain things faster, then this will result obviously in a backlog. So you'll find a situation where the genuine persons, the decent people who are not paying bribes, file their applications, and then the applications either sits on someone's desk for years without being granted, without being considered, or the applications are denied. And these may be people who genuinely deserve whatever license or permit is being applied for. And what happens is that these kind of activities drive away investors. It drives away people who genuinely want to do business in Dominica. How often have we heard persons complain saying it is too difficult to do business in Dominica, or it takes years to get any little thing done in Dominica? So all of these things are symptoms of problems within the system, which are sometimes linked towards corruption. I'm not pointing a finger at any one person, but we know that there are persons in public life who accept monies on the side, gifts on the side, in order to fast track applications, etc. And that is corruption. Now, looking at the second code, it says, in the course of the performance of his official functions, well, let me just remind you of how it begins. A person in public life shall not, in the course of the performance of his official functions, discriminate against any person with respect to terms, conditions, and privileges of employment or other official matters because of that person's race, place of origin, political opinion, color, creed, or gender. Do we see discrimination in Dominica? Is there a common understanding that in order to get a scholarship, a job, duty-free, housing assistance, etc., you must support the sitting government? These are all questions that I'm asking. Our Integrity in Public Office Act says that this kind of discrimination is wrong, and in addition to being wrong, it is unlawful. It is in fact a criminal offense because Section 30 of the IPO Act states, and I quote, "Every person in public life shall observe the body of rules known as the Code of Conduct specified in the second schedule. A person in public life who is in breach of the Code of Conduct is guilty of an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $10,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 1 year or to both such fine and imprisonment." So these two codes, which I have read as examples of what the law says, we ought not to do, are actually part of criminal offenses. It is a criminal offense to breach the code of conduct. Now, just to give you two more examples of the code, it states that a person in public life shall not for himself or for anyone else accept any gift, benefit, or advantage from anyone except personal gifts from a friend or relative, or personal gifts given otherwise than as a motive or reward for doing or forbearing to do anything in the performance of his official function, or causing any person from doing or forbearing to do anything. And then the final example I will give is that a person in public life shall not allow private interest to conflict with his public duties or improperly influence his conduct in the performance of his public duties. Allow the pursuit of his private interest to interfere with the proper discharge of his public duties, and any conflict between his private interest, and his public duties shall be reserved in favor of his public duties. Now, to answer the second question that I asked, why is it important to fight corruption? I will quote what was said by the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan. And this is what he said. Corruption is an insidious plague that has a wide range of corrosive effects on societies. It undermines democracy and the rule of law, leads to violations of human rights, distorts markets, erodes the quality of life, and allows organized crime, terrorism, and other threats to human security to flourish. This evil phenomenon is found in all countries, big and small, rich and poor. But it is in the developing world that its effects are most destructive. Corruption hurts the poor disproportionately by diverting funds intended for development, undermining a government's ability to provide basic services, feeding inequality and injustice, and discouraging foreign aid and investment. Corruption is a key element in economic underdevelopment and a major obstacle to poverty alleviation and development. End of quote. I think this sets out clearly why it is important to fight corruption, why it is important for us as Dominicans to unite in the fight against corruption and not fight each other. Now, I will move on to examine the legislation because obviously the idea behind this panel discussion was to get the opinion of my very esteemed panelists, but also to educate members of the public on what is within the text, what is within the IPO legislation, and the role that everyone can play in the fight against corruption. So I will begin with the role that members of the public can play. And your role is crucial. Any and every person who has evidence of corruption or who has evidence that a person in public life has breached the code of conduct can make a complaint to the Integrity Commission under Section 31 of the Act. This complaint must be in writing, and it should give full details of the corruption as far as it is known to the complainants. The law provides that such a complaint can be made in person or sent by registered post to the chairman of the commission. So what this means is that if you, ordinary member of the public interacting with a person in public life, if you have evidence that this person in public life has requested a bribe or has given kickbacks or requested kickbacks, etc., if you have evidence that this kind of thing has occurred, then you can simply write a letter to the Integrity Commission. Include details of your evidence. Who is the person involved? What it is that you have observed? Whether it is that you have evidence, what the evidence is. Write that letter. You can deliver it to the Integrity Commission, or you can send it by registered post. Once that letter is received, once the complaint is received, we as a commission, we are mandated by law to consider the complaint. If the complaint is frivolous, then we can reject the complaint if it is that, we consider it to be frivolous. However, if we have the opinion that this is a genuine complaint and that an inquiry is necessary in order to see whether there has in fact been a breach of the code of conduct, then as a commission, the law says we must hold an inquiry. Right? So since I have joined the commission, and that was since 2019, we have received absolutely no complaints. In fact, since the changes to the law in 2015, there have been no complaints filed before the Integrity Commission, but I will address that later. Additionally, members of the public who have evidence that bribery has been committed can make a report directly to the police. The IPO Act creates criminal offenses which can be investigated by the police as well as the Integrity Commission. In fact, the Act was drafted in such a way that the Integrity Commission is supposed to be working alongside with the police force in order to investigate corruption. For example, under Section 38 of the Act, it is an offense to offer, solicit, or accept bribes. Now I repeat, to offer, to solicit, or to accept bribes. So the law recognizes that it's not only those persons who accept the bribes who commit a criminal offense. It is also the persons who offer the bribe and who pay the bribe. These persons also commit a very serious criminal offense. Now, this offense is punishable on indictment, meaning at the High Court, by a fine of $25,000 and to imprisonment for a term of 10 years, or to both such fine or imprisonment. So it is amazing that even, with this punishment, this penalty, people are still engaging in acts of corruption. In addition to the penalty, a forfeiture order can be made, where the proceeds of the bribery can be forfeited and, be handed over to the state. Now, the legislation, that is the IPO Act, also deals with unaccounted for properties. Section 47 provides that a person in public life who is found to be in possession of property or pecuniary resource disproportionate to his legitimate sources of income is guilty of an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $2,000, an imprisonment of 2 years, and to forfeiture of the assets so found. So if it is that a person in public life is earning an annual salary of, let's say, $60,000, and during a certain period, without taking any loan, etc., that person was able to acquire a property worth $1 million, and that person is unable to show how it is that he or she acquired that property, how it is that he or she got the money to pay for that property, then the property will be considered as unaccounted for property. And that person in public life can be charged with a criminal offense. The property can be seized and handed over to the state. So, I've illustrated certain ways in which members of the public can play a role, and I would like to emphasize that it is important for members of the public, those people who have evidence of corruption, to stand up, to have the courage, come forward, file your complaint. Because very often we hear persons speaking about it on the streets or calling on radio programs, etc. But there's only so much that can be done when you speak about something on the street, when you complain to your friends in small circles. If it is that something is wrong, rather than just complain about it, do something about it. File a complaint, whether to the commission or whether with the police, or preferably with both the police and the commission, so that we, as the commissioners, we will be forced to investigate the complaint. And if it is that we don't, then I guess, one of us can file another judicial review. Now, there's also, importantly, there's a role that we as commissioners and staff of the commission must play. As I indicated, we are mandated by law to consider complaints. In addition to this power, we are mandated by law to hold inquiries into gifts which are received by persons in public life. The Act provides that it is unlawful for a person in public life to accept a gift from any person as a reward for any official act done by the person in public life, or as an inducement of any official act to be done by a person in public life. The Integrity Commission, after holding this inquiry into gifts, we have the power to direct the person in public life to deliver the gift to the financial secretary so that it will become an asset of the state. Under section 47(2), it states where a person who is or who was a person in public life or any other person on his behalf is suspected to be in possession of property disproportionate to his legitimate sources of income, the Commission shall conduct an inquiry into sources of income of that person. On the conclusion of this inquiry, the Commission must submit a report to the DPP, that is the Director of Public Prosecution. The DPP has the power to then undertake criminal proceedings against the person in public life after reading our report. Even further, some of us may know that persons in public life are required to file annual declarations with the Integrity Commission, stating exactly how much they earned throughout the year, what is the balance on their bank accounts, what loans they have, etc. So they must file this financial declaration stating their assets, their liabilities, and also they must include the names of their family members, etc., in terms of spouses and children. So what we do at the Commission is that we do a comparative exercise where we compare the declarations for the previous years together with supporting documents to the declaration of the current year under review. And if it is that we have reasons to suspect that this declaration is inaccurate, or if it is that there appears to be an increase in assets which cannot be accounted for, then we can, under the legislation, hold an inquiry to determine whether this person in public life has unaccounted for properties. So I've addressed the role of members of the public, and I've looked at the role of the Commission. Another player who is very important in this fight against corruption under the IPO is the Director of Public Prosecution. Section 34 of the Act provides that on the conclusion of any inquiry into alleged breaches of the Code of Conduct, the Integrity Commission must submit a report to the DPP and the President. It states further, where the DPP is satisfied on the examination of the reports and or the relevant evidence that a person in public life ought to be prosecuted for an offense under Section 30, he shall institute and undertake criminal proceedings against the person in public life. The DPP is required to inform the Commission in writing about actions taken in pursuance of our reports. So that's the third player. Now the fourth player is the person in public life. As I said before, the persons in public life are required to file declarations annually. Additionally, they are required to respond to any queries which we as a Commission may submit to them. And these queries are simply questions that we may want them to answer based on our review of their declaration. The fifth player, Parliament. Under the legislation, Parliament must receive annual reports from the Integrity Commission. And it is expected that when these reports are submitted to Parliament, the reports will be read, examined, and discussed publicly. the police plays a very important role in investigating corruption. And as I said before, the Act also states that the Commissioner of Police must provide us with assistance in performing our duties. Now, the last player, and this is probably one of the most important players, is the judiciary. The courts, the High Court of Justice, the magistrate courts, they are responsible for hearing and determining complaints of corruption. Because although the Act speaks about the commission holding inquiries, etc., at the end of these inquiries, we have to submit a report to the DPP, and the DPP then would have to make the decision as to whether to file criminal complaints. When the criminal complaints are filed, it is the justice system, the judges, the magistrates, who will make, well, and the jury, of course, who would make the final decision as to whether a person is guilty or not of a criminal offense. The powers we have as it relates to compelling persons to do things in terms of, well, consequences more relate to gifts, where we have the power to compel a person to hand over a gift to the financial secretary in certain circumstances. So now I've examined the text, and I hope that, now that we all know what avenues are available in terms of, the role that members of the public can play in the fight against corruption, I trust that, perhaps persons with evidence of corruption will come forward and make complaints. So the final issue I want to look at is, how does the IPO legislation work in fact, and what can we do to make it better, if anything? I am honestly of the opinion that the legislation is not working as it should. Since 2015, as I stated, we have received absolutely no complaints. I do not believe that when this act was originally passed, this is how it was envisaged, that the commission would operate simply to receive declarations, review declarations, ask questions, certify persons, hold inquiries into gifts. I think that the role of the commission, as it was envisaged originally, is to be the watchdog, to be the main entity fighting corruption, holding those in public office accountable. We see commissions in other parts of the world, in other parts of the region, Jamaica, for example, actually functioning, holding inquiries into corruption, handing over reports. We see prosecutions. But in Dominica, as I said, there have not even been complaints, far less for prosecution, under the IPO legislation since 2015. Now, how can we make it better? How can we improve the legislation in order to properly fight corruption? My first suggestion, and this is my personal suggestion, I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission, I'm speaking, on my own behalf, is that the 2015 amendments which were made need to be reversed. In 2015, there was a large public outcry against the amendments from some persons. Many remained silent. But between 2015 and now, we have seen that these amendments have in fact neutered the commission to an extent. The amendments created a commission. Well, firstly, the amendments changed the composition of the commission, where currently, I'm not making any imputation as to, personal integrity. But currently, there are only 3 persons on the commission. 2 of the members are appointed based on the recommendation of the Prime Minister, and 1 is appointed based on the recommendation of the Leader of the Opposition. This makes no sense. Because obviously the politicians who hold public office, these are the persons who are more at risk of getting involved in corruption. And if it is that this entity is supposed to be fighting corruption, playing its role as a public watchdog, then it is important. It is only logical that the majority of the members who sit on the commission should not be appointed based on the nomination of the very person or very group of people who, they're supposed to be scrutinizing. So I believe that we should return to the former legislation where majority of the members were appointed based on nominations by independent bodies, such as the Dominica Bar Association, for example. I do not believe that it is in our interest, whether you support the government or not, I do not believe that it is in our interest as Dominicans to have a commission with, a composition where majority of the members are appointed by the sitting government. To me, this makes absolutely no sense. I believe also that we need whistleblower protection. We absolutely need it. The 2015 legislation created certain amendments which made it very, very disadvantageous to be a whistleblower, in that it created penalties for persons who file false and malicious complaints. It also, based on the 2015 amendments, an amendment was made that specified that the name of the complainant must be given to the person in public life. I do not believe that is necessary. If it is that a complaint was made, then, regardless of who made the complaint, the fact is that, if the complaint is valid, it should be investigated. If a corrupt act was done, then there should be some consequence. Someone should be held accountable. So I believe that amendments should be made in order to provide for anonymous complaints. I believe also that there's a need to increase the capacity of the Integrity Commission to investigate allegations of corruption. When we look at legislation such as the Proceeds of Crime Act or the anti-terrorism legislation, we see that the police and members of the FIU, they have all sorts of wide powers in order to investigate crimes, whether it is drug trafficking, etc. And this is good, this is excellent. But I'm saying that we, as the anti-corruption agency, we should have similar powers, because corruption kills, corruption hurts. As Kofi Annan explained, when there is corruption, then hospitals are left without resources, without basic medication, because the state monies, the state resources, which are supposed to be designated towards buying medication, equipment, etc., it is being diverted elsewhere. So corruption literally kills. So, as I said, I believe there's a need to strengthen the legislation. However, I will urge Dominicans, my fellow Dominicans, regardless of how weak the current legislation may be, let us not use that as an excuse to shy away from our duty to Dominica, from our responsibility to our country, to ourselves, and to our future generation. Yes, the legislation may need strengthening. However, let us use what we currently have. Let us try to be persons of integrity, persons who are strong, courageous, and wise, and let us join together to play our respective roles in fighting corruption. Thank you.
As citizens of this country, then the Integrity in Public Act, the Integrity in Public Office Act, can be brought to life. The acoustics in here, are good enough, for your voice to carry. Huh? Oh, you've got a mic. Okay, great.
I just want to add to what Commissioner Shillingford said regarding whistleblower protection. All members mentioned that there were no complaints since 2015. On October the 9th, this year to the 12th, I had the opportunity to represent the Integrity Commission at a UNODC regional platform for the Caribbean in Trinidad. The objective was to constitute a forum which state parties, based on their knowledge, would collaboratively develop a roadmap. The Integrity Commission was responsible for the thematic area, reporting channels, and whistleblower protection. The former commission, and I was with them from since 2008, the former commission received complaints since its inception in 2008. We must note that in 2015, the act was repealed and replaced. And we should pay attention in particular to section 31, which states that any person who wishes to make a formal complaint may do so. However, the complainant will be notified that such and such a person made a complaint against them. So I think that we are not receiving complaints for the fear of reprisal and not necessarily that the persons are afraid to approach the commission. So that's the difference why we are not receiving complaints, mainly because persons are afraid of reprisals. And if the complaints are found to be frivolous, then these persons can be prosecuted. And that's the difference from the 2008 to 2015 legislation. So when it was repealed and replaced in 2015, those persons now making the complaints can be prosecuted.
Well, thank you very much. Does any of the panelists want to comment on that?
Yes, well, yeah, I agree that, that is really perhaps, one of the main reasons why we are not receiving complaints. Because the 2015 legislation, as was rightly said, created penalties for complainants who make complaints which are found to be false. Now, I just wanted to highlight that section 55 of the legislation. It says that a person who maliciously makes a false allegation or maliciously provides false information related to bribery, corruption, or accounted for property is guilty of an offense and is liable on indictment to a fine of 30,000 or imprisonment for a term of 5 years, or to both such fine and imprisonment. That is the legislation. Now, it speaks to making a false and malicious complaint. So, on the one hand, if it is that your complaint was not made maliciously, or your complaint is based on facts, true facts, then you are really not at risk under this section. However, on the other hand, someone might say that, I do not want to put myself at risk of being accused of making a false and malicious complaint because the penalty is too harsh. What if I am unable to prove the complaint? So for this reason, I think that Section 55 is a deterrent to persons who have evidence of corruption and, who, may not have the strongest evidence, but it is evidence nonetheless that warrants further digging. Right. So yes. So there certainly needs to be an amendment to the legislation to make it to make it easier for persons to come forward. However, I do not believe that the fact that there's an offense, that this offense exists as it relates to false and malicious complaints, should deter persons who have evidence. If you have evidence, come forward with the evidence.
Okay, I think Pastor Jack wants to ask a question.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I just listening to the this bright people, lawyers with all the information, and just the fact of the disagreement with, or you mentioned you don't agree with the present composition of the commission, and that it is political appointments, and I always believe political appointments, will represent, and that's not to thing anybody, but political appointment represents the political interest. I'm hearing about the commission of police. That's a political appointment. Who would want to go to him when it's a political appointment? And that leads to the fact I was saying, persons will take care of their livelihood. They look at their livelihood when making decisions. What I found interesting in reading this little handbook on frequently asked questions from the commission, the question comes: who are not qualified to be members of the commission? I found that very interesting because we're looking at persons representing us that are persons who have good moral standing, persons who are ethical in their behavior. And one of the things I find interesting, it says one person will be disqualified to be members of the House of Assembly, and then they say, for example, a minister of religion. I just believe, a minister of religion. So a minister of religion, with all of what we stand for, with all of what we can represent, in this country we are forbidden to be, to make that kind of contribution, to call people to accountability. You're saying, keep us out. And I'm reading further, and it says, it puts us in the same line with an undischarged bankrupt and a certified insane person. We're in the same line. You know what I'm saying? And I'm that kind of disrespect, for us. We can't get ourselves involved. We can't be appointed as a senator. We have contributions to make. And now you're saying a body that says you need to be accountable in the country, that is now solely by political appointment, we leader of the opposition or not, you are now telling the Dominican public that ministers of religion are forbidden to be on that. I mean, come on. Help me, somebody.
But the question that enters my mind, though, is there any reason given for that? No?
It's just the following categories of persons are not qualified to be members of the commission when asked who are not qualified to be members of the commission. That is in the handbook.
Maybe. Okay. Question, you were going to say something? Alice?
Yes,
Yeah,
I was
okay.
saying that I think the disqualification is because they are also disqualified from being members of the House of Assembly. So I think that's how it goes. They're not qualified to be members. That doesn't make it right either. You know, and I've heard the complaint over and over again, and I think really it is time that, what is it you all have, Christian Council, whatever it is, make a stance, do something, present a petition for the change of the law in that regard. You know, there is something that you can do. If you find it is discrimination, do something about it. It is not the first time I've heard the complaint, and I think it is something that really ought to be looked into and done, something done about it. You know?
Do you have any more questions from the audience?
Well, just a potential comment. First of all, congrats to the panelists. Yes, saying just a comment really on two areas. But first off, congratulations and commendations to the panel, as well as the Integrity Commission for the ongoing work. It is a very necessary work, not an easy one, but a necessary one. I think if you will, most of what has been said of our region, and that includes Latin America and the Caribbean region as a whole, we suffer from a sort of systemic issue with regards to corruption. And I really want to hark back on the whole topic of the backlash for whistleblowers and so on. But where you have systemic corruption, such as in the Latin American area and the Caribbean, for which we are not an exception here in Dominica, you need a systems approach. And I'm not privy to the draft or the legislation, but I think a way forward, in line with all of what that has been said, is to look at ways that we could kind of tackle the issue about the reprisals that was mentioned, fear of being targeted and victimization, et cetera, et cetera. So I think one of the ways is to look at maybe how, as I said, I'm not privy to the draft, but maybe moving forward, certain amendments that could be made, et cetera, that could incorporate, maybe adopting a more flexible political approach, trying to build or enhance or in certain ways, I think, augment the culture of integrity in our region, by extension in Dominica for sure, and to look at how we can strengthen the political will, strengthen citizenry support for the fight against corruption, again stressing that it is enemy number one. So I think we need to maybe redesign, look at the existing laws, look at, as I said, the current legislation that I'm not privy to, but maybe those on the panel can comment. But I think definitely we need to look at designing or maybe tweaking, adapting, emphasizing ways in which we can certainly counteract the backlash, because whatever legislation is in place must take into account, must anticipate potential backlash, potential sort of recriminations from whoever it may be, who is actually alleged or accused or against which a complaint may be made. And so I think if the legislation and laws can factor in the backlash and be designed to cope and to cater for that and deal with that, then I think certainly that would be a greater strength, a greater empowerment, I think a greater aid to bring in persons more towards the fore, and certainly with greater confidence and less potential for intimidation.
Okay, if there are no more questions from the audience, well, we have a time frame within which we're operating here this evening, and it's good to see that we will be able to stick to it. But I just want to add that I mean, I have a media bias here. I'm a creature of the media. And therefore, I also strongly believe that the media have a role to play, very strong role, very important role to play in promoting the role of, promoting integrity in public office in the Commonwealth of Dominica. And I took a few notes I just want to suggest, to the audience and our viewers and the panel, some of the things I think the media can look at. And before we end, I also want to go back to Pastor Jean-Jacques after this for a question which I promised at the beginning. But I just want to point out very quickly that I think the media's primary role is to inform the public. And that is why I think coming out of this, that we can see a greater media presence of information from the Integrity Commission. I am willing to work with you to make that happen if you really want to. So the media is responsible for informing the public about the actions and decisions of those in public office. And it includes reporting on policies, legislation, and other actions taken by public officials. It also involves reporting on the work of the Integrity Commission. Informing scrutiny and accountability. The media acts as a watchdog, scrutinizing the actions of public officials and holding them accountable. This can involve I'm sorry, my computer just conked out to me, okay. This can involve investigating political misconduct or corruption and ensuring that public officials are acting in the best interests of the people. Public opinion, the media can shape public opinion about those in public office through news stories, editorials, and opinion pieces. The media can influence how the public perceives public officials and their actions. Platform for dialogue. The media provides a platform for public officials as they communicate with the public. This can include press conferences, interviews, and social media posts. And transparency. By reporting on the actions of public officials, the media contributes to transparency in public office. This allows the public to be informed about what the elected officials are doing and why. And I just want to say that to facilitate the work of the media, it would be very helpful if those in public office and those in institutions like the Integrity Commission would be receptive and more responsive to approaches by the media for information. So we see the need, and we need to really take up our responsibility, but we also need the collaboration of those people in positions of power and authority from whom we have to get that information. So before we end, I would like to ask each panelist, Pastor Jean-Jacques, very quickly, before we go around the table, what do you think the church, because you spoke, about the ills in society that need to be addressed, but and the fact that people need to take up their responsibility as citizens, but how do you think the church can assist in helping people to understand their roles and to do something about it?
Thank you for the question. The church, the dynamics of the church is such that we represent persons across the board, from all parties. So there has to be caution, in terms of how some things are addressed. My whole approach would be the David and Nathan kind of approach, in addressing some stuff. I think we can't, because of the dynamics of things, make statements that points to one person against the other. I think what I'm encouraging and what we try to encourage within church is to meet persons face to face. I am that kind of person. Meet persons, when we talk about addressing things, meet person face to face and talk about that. But within our pulpit, through the teachings, the teaching consistent teaching of the Bible points to the fact of integrity, points to the fact of walking right, points to the fact of living right, and point to the fact of persons in their deliberations, in their interaction with others, be considerate, be understanding, understand the fight, understand that we are brothers, we are one, we fight a common cause, and we want to push in that direction to fight that common cause. Some of us might be more vocal than others. We live in a country that I am at DBS, for example, and because I'm at DBS, persons brand me one way. I went to a particular church, and then they brand me another way. That's how people are. And because we brand so much, as ministers of the gospel, we have to be cautious, especially as we lead congregation, because our constituents, our people come from different political persuasion, different interests, that kind of stuff. So it's a little tricky. you know, and we have to address it with the wisdom of the Lord from the pulpit. So I can't just say this is how we do it, but within the church, we seek to teach the people how we should do it. And I'm listening to my fellow panelists. I think there is also the need now for the church to bring in that kind of discussion within its walls. So that's what I would recommend, because, I mean, even just going through this simple handbook, which I think should be made available to the public, maybe they could tell us where we could get this, because this is loaded with information, just a simple handbook, but thought that showed me so much. So bringing that type of information to the local church is important, because where there's ignorance, if we're ignorant of something, we can't help the process. And I think there's a lot of ignorance within the church in terms of that particular aspect of dealing. So that would be my recommendation.
Right. Thank you, Pastor Jean-Jacques. I'll take that as your closing statement. So let's complete the process by going to Mrs. Knight Didier for final
that's
statement.
my closing statement.
Yes,
I've said everything I wanted to say.
Yeah, just summarize, yes.
I wanted to just respond to your comments on the media and the role of the media. You framed it as things that the media may do or can do. I think it was Mr. Julian Johnson who, when the IPO just started out, when it was being released, he said in a press release, it is the duty of the media. So it's not just what you can do or you may do, it is your duty. I have it right here. He says they have a duty to monitor the workings of government and the workings of the parliament on behalf of the public. So it is your civic duty. And the things that the rest of the public cannot get away with, when we ask a question, we're branded and labeled. The press can ask any question they want, You might be branded and labeled, but tomorrow you can ask a question of the opposition of the government. They can brand you however you want, however they want. You are the media. You are the media, and you have a larger voice than most of us. So embrace that duty, ask the questions, insist on the press conferences, stand up outside until they give it to you. And that's the way you can possibly do it. So again, I just want to remind all of us, as I said, it is our civic duty. It's our responsibility. It's not just a can do and we want to, but it is a duty and civic duty of all of us, because it is in the interest of the country to act, to speak out, to do whatever we can do, and not allow acts of corruption to affect us, be directly affected by it, affect our neighbor, and do nothing and just sit back. We're going down a slippery slope. So let's act.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Knight Didier. Ms. Shillingford, you have the final word.
Thank you. Okay, so I will like to join my fellow panelists in encouraging members of the public to perform their civic duties and speak up against corruption. I know that, it may be difficult, it may be hard to fight corruption, to make complaints, to come forward. However, the things which are most valuable in life, the things which are worth it, do not come easily. And I'm saying to you that having a society which is free of corruption, having a society where those in public office work in the public interest is definitely worth it. We do not want a situation where, we end up going down the slippery slope and, ending up in a situation like Haiti, for example. We do not want to be forced to migrate and leave Dominica in order to have a decent life, a better life. Dominica is ours. Nobody can deport us from Dominica and send us elsewhere. We have a right to be here because this is where we were born, most of us. So let us try to unite in the fight against corruption. Let us have the courage, the strength, and the wisdom, I repeat, the wisdom to stand up, to speak up, and to act, not just remain silent and, pray about it. Prayer is important. God, I strongly believe in God. He is in control of everything. But I think the Bible speaks about faith without works, so you need both faith and works. So let us act as Dominicans, so that we can save our country, save our future, save the future of our children. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panelists for helping this evening to make the country, well, to those who listened and who watched, more informed on the integrity in public office and their roles and responsibilities in ensuring that this comes to life and remains alive in this country. Thank you to the Integrity Commission for organizing this. I mean, it's, I think, a wonderful initiative, as I said at the beginning, and I think it's an initiative that should be just beginning, you know, that should continue. And I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for inviting me to be the moderator. It has made me, I have some knowledge now about integrity in public office. And as I said, I look forward to working with you, and continuing to educate the Dominican public on the subject. So thank you all for coming, and I also extend a very hearty thanks to those of you who watched, via online or whatever other means or the platform. Oh, I'm sorry, you have a vote of thanks. Oh, okay. Well, I was in the mood to give a vote of thanks on behalf of the Commission, but certainly.
I was going to say the moderator stole. He stole the vote of thanks.
I'm sorry, I'm told.
But it was very beautifully done. It was done as only a journalist can do it. And so I have a beautiful, beautiful task, is to stand and direct a little bit of gratitude to our panelists. Our panelists were awesome. They gave us so much to think about. I think each of them needed 2 hours so that they could interact. Yes, it was beautiful. You heard about judicial review. Guys, these are things we take for granted as a society. Judicial review, it is our right. Natural justice. You heard about these beautiful things. Whistleblower. These are powerful terms, but they are terms that empower all of us. So tonight, before we leave, we want to say a hearty thank you, and I will begin with Commissioner Shillingford. Commissioner Shillingford, you were awesome. Thank you so very much. Somebody? And a member of staff of the commission will hand her our little bit of gratitude. Make sure you eat something in it as you're going down, eh? All right. And secondly, we want to say to Mrs. Knight Didier, Mrs. Didier, you were awesome. And we really need to have you back again. Really and truly, I think people need to hear these things and hear it often enough so that it becomes the way that we operate. And so we offer one to Mrs. Didier. Don't let your son eat everything. Make sure you get something. And smile well. We are so very, very grateful for your time. And you can see the amount of preparation that went into this. And Pastor Jean-Jacques, you gave us such a unique blend of the street vibes. All right? Thank you so very very, very much. And for our esteemed moderator who gave us such a unique perspective on what the media can do, and we all believe that the media can do it and should do it responsibly. Thank you. He never grows old. So as we just leave, I just want to also say thank you to the chairman for his very, very wonderful welcome to us, and to Commissioner Holmes, who gave us the bios of the panel. We will do this again, and the next time we do it, of course, the numbers will triple because people will begin to understand the value of it all. We thank the Open Campus also. Good evening, everybody, and get home safely. Thank you.
And thus we come to the end of this activity at the UWI Global
And
Campus.
there's a little refreshment for you as you're going. eat a little something. Tessa will help you. Yes, Tessa. And Nigel.
A panel discussion organized by the Integrity Commission, and the intention really of this panel discussion was to raise awareness of the need for integrity in society. So the Integrity Commission organized this activity, and this also comes ahead of the international observance of Anti-Corruption Day. And this day is really on the 9th of December, but the Commission organized this activity as a precursor to the actual observance of International Anti-Corruption Day. So the panelists this evening, we heard from Attorney at Law Noelis Knight Didier. We also heard from Michel Jean-Jacques from the DAEC, the Dominican Association of Evangelical Churches, and we also had a presentation from Attorney at Law Cara Shillingford Marsh, who is a commissioner as well on the Integrity Commission. Very, very interesting discussion moderated there by journalist Tim Dura, and I must say a pretty encouraging turnout this evening at this panel discussion organized by the Integrity Commission, and we heard the call for more such exercises being undertaken by the Commission, and for more involvement of the public as well, as far as the issue of integrity in public office in particular is concerned. So it was really a pleasure to bring this to you, both on radio and on the internet. And let me thank our Chief Engineer, Dean Thomas, and also Hassan Robinson, who played a pivotal role in ensuring that you could view it with no hitches. So we thank you for joining us, and it's back to Studio 1, the Ted Daily Studio at DBS Radio. I'm Ivona John Baptist Luge. Good night.